Self-expression is in short supply these days, and it tracks with a cultural shift towards conservatism not just online but also IRL. The rise of anti-intellectualism, along with the devaluing of art and other creative fields, is something that's really harmful to society in ways that not everyone may necessarily consider. In a world where new shows and new content go viral almost instantly, you would think people would have an easier time finding a fandom or a creative outlet that suits their interests. And in some ways, that is true. It has never been easier to create your own fan art slash fan fiction of your favorite characters doing whatever you want, or doing whomever they want. So, if accessibility into a fandom isn't an issue these days with both the internet as well as learning skills related to said fandoms, why does it feel like fandom culture is on a decline? And what does that say about self expression and media literacy overall? I'm Ayasuna and I make videos, more specifically art videos. And it took for me to make art of an obscure magical girl anime from the 2000s to actually think about this topic. Actually, it had been on my mind for quite a while, but this video footage that I had here gave me the time to actually talk about it. For a lot of artists, fandom culture is really important, both as inspiration to even start art to begin with, and giving artists the opportunity to work for some of their favorite studios. A lot of the famous artists on Instagram or YouTube likely got their start from drawing fan art. Even if the artist doesn't particularly draw fan art, they are likely inspired by some of their most favorite pieces of fiction. So it really isn't a stretch to say that fandom culture is really important for modern artists. And as such, the health of fandom culture directly ties into the health of the art community. And both have had some troubling signs these past few years. Supposedly, in a world where we have platforms that are catered to expressing ourselves, people seem more afraid than ever to actually do so. Especially with my generation, I happen to be part of Gen Z, albeit on the slightly older side. And I'm old enough to remember a time where people were able to enjoy their fandoms without being called cringe immediately. A time where short form video wasn't really a thing. And if you really wanted to stay current with your favorite anime or manga, you had to wait for it to be scanned to English or posted on YouTube. I'm sure you guys know the ones where you had to watch an anime in 3 different videos, with each having a different part cropped out. Or if you were lucky enough to have TV growing up, you likely turned on 4Kids dubs, which totally butchered any semblance of continuity within your favorite shows. This was especially the case for Tokyo Mew Mew, or the English 4Kids version, Mew Mew Power. Let's just say how we consumed media 20 years ago is a lot different than how we consume it now. For anime fans in particular, it was weeks, if not months, before we could even see the next part of a series that already finished airing in Japan. But it wasn't even just anime. For a kid, when I was growing up, it felt like an eternity to see what happened in Book 3 of Avatar. Streaming services weren't really a thing back then. This was back when Netflix actually sold CDs. I guess my whole rant about how we used to consume media on the early days of the internet, slash old school cable TV, is that things were often left open for fandom discussion. Back then, people's attention spans were actually not just 30 seconds, and while convention culture was definitely not as mainstream as it is now, fan art and fan fiction were in their heyday. If it weren't for shows like Avatar or Tokyo Mew Mew, I likely would have never started drawing myself. Seeing my favorite characters in action was what made me want to pick up the pencil. And every now and again, I'd make the time to do some self-indulgent fan art to remind myself of this, because even as someone in their mid-20s, I still enjoy Tokyo Mew Mew and Avatar as much as I first watched them. And every year that I watch these shows, I get a greater appreciation for them. Not just the action scenes, but the whole thought of the series being put together. It's because of these fandoms as to why some original characters are created, which go on to make their own series and spin-offs. I mean, Dragon Ball Z, one of the most famous animated series of all time, essentially started off as a spin-off from Journey to the West. With modern literature and even classical literature, fan art and fandom culture have always been a thing. And in a way, that Sonic fan art you likely made in middle school is still a part of art history. It's important to talk about these topics as they don't really get enough coverage in the whole aspect of art history and media literacy. And if you happen to like topics such as this, then don't hesitate to like this video as well as subscribe. While you don't need to study every single artist that ever existed, I do think understanding art history and media literacy will make you a better artist. And even if you aren't an artist, I still think learning these things will help you get a greater appreciation for some of your most favorite shows, as well as other forms of media. And because of those reasons that I mentioned is why I think it's important to talk about the current state of fandom culture. And don't get me wrong, there are some fandoms that are just toxic that you don't really want to touch with a 10-foot pole. I mean, I was a League player for 3 years. I know toxicity when I see it. And when a fandom definitely panders towards younger audiences, it makes sense that juvenile behavior is sure to follow. And while I definitely don't stand for death threats or doxing threats, there aren't really many places for children to really express themselves IRL. And while the internet is definitely not a substitute for that, it's totally understandable as to why someone younger might be drawn towards something like that. Even though it might not necessarily always be appropriate, people always want to blame certain fandoms for certain things. And while there's always going to be idiots online, that's just the internet these days, a great majority of people in these fandom spaces are actually pretty chill. But that doesn't negate the sour feelings towards fandom culture in the past year or so. And there are a few reasons as to why I think this is such an issue, or why it seems like this toxicity is more prevalent now than it ever really was. I think first and foremost is this weird sense of purity culture. And what I mean by that, it's not necessarily a religious thing, although some users may take it that way. I think the issue comes with having to sanitize every single piece of media that you consume. I obviously get why some pieces of media need to have trigger warnings because people have gone through so many different things, and obviously, if you're not up to see it, it can be traumatizing. I understand that. But on the flip side, I consider myself to be someone who's anti censorship in most cases. I definitely don't believe that we should hide or not talk about difficult issues because they're difficult. In the context of art, such themes are likely representative of some parts of human history. And in a lot of ways, the media we consume is a way to digest the things that have happened in history. I've said it plenty of times before, but artists are pretty opinionated. And for a lot of popular fandoms, the artists or creators or authors or whoever took the time to create their universes with the goals of making some commentary on it. Shows like Avatar in particular know how to handle darker themes in a way that's still easy to understand for most audiences. I mean, yes, it is a kids' show, but it doesn't shy away from talking about issues such as genocide and the effects of war. I think the show is important because it strikes a balance between being able to talk about serious issues but still being able to find the joy in everyday life. There's a reason why it aged so well compared to other cartoons of that era. On the other side of this whole purity culture debate is how women are portrayed in media, and I've actually talked about that quite a bit before. I already made a video regarding fan service, particularly in video games. My take on the issue as someone who considers themselves to be aro ace is that there's nothing inherently wrong with sexualizing female characters. I think how you do it does matter in some instances though. I don't know what it is, but there's weird moral superiority. That if a woman is more confident about herself and her body, she's automatically seen as less. Or that she's automatically appealing to the male gaze. And likewise, if a character doesn't appeal to the male gaze, then she's automatically a bad character as well. It's really a horseshoe thing where either way the female character is more likely to be demonized for doing the same things that a male does. And just so I'm clear here, when I'm talking about female characters, I'm talking about characters that are very clearly adults. Don't be weird, I'm not trying to attract the wrong crowd on my videos. I mean characters like Tifa or Bayonetta, characters like that. Another prominent issue that I see a lot of in fandom spaces, both for anime and non-anime shows and movies and media, is the issue of gatekeeping. It's like if you hit a certain age, it's like you're almost not allowed to enjoy anything anymore. Which doesn't make sense because people who obviously have the time and money to devote to fan fiction, fan art, and of the like are more likely to be adults. Some of the best fanfic authors are people who are married and have kids and lives. The people who even create these shows to begin with are adults. They obviously have a passion for design and storytelling, so obviously that's something they devoted their lives to. And to add to this point is that there's the whole notion of if you like something, it's automatically cringe. Despite social media being so prevalent and being able to see how people live their lives in so many different ways, the urge and pressure to conform has never been higher. Like I said, self expression is in short supply. Because people live in fear of being ridiculed for what they like, they're scared to show anything off about themselves. It becomes a situation where the snake eats itself. We won't get past this purity culture / rise in conservatism if we don't deal with our own issues with self expression. And I hate to say that, but part of that does come with living. I was very insecure when I was a teenager, but it didn't stop me from interacting in the fandom spaces that I truly enjoyed. I turned what I liked into something that I enjoy doing, and that's what I did with this channel and my art in general. It's also why I think it's important for a lot of people to find something to be passionate about as far as creativity. It doesn't have to specifically be art, but just doing something creative can help you feel more confident in expressing yourself. Now, I also get the fact that some people are not able to do so because of whatever circumstance, whether that's cultural or not. And that also plays a role IRL as well as in fandom spaces. This behavior didn't come out of nowhere, it was obviously learned. I just think it's weird for some people to white knight themselves in protection of a fictional character. I do think that in some cases fiction does depict reality, and a lot of these characters are a commentary on human society. At the end of the day, these characters aren't real, they don't really need you to defend them. If people spent half as much time as they got angry over fictional characters as they do in real life issues, I think the world would be a better place. And I have a feeling I'm not the only one who feels that way. And it's ironic that a lot of the issues I mentioned here are issues that also apply to the art community. Whether it's the obsessive gatekeeping, or shaming NSFW artists for drawing artwork of adult characters. It's this black and white thinking that's allowing us to miss a lot of the themes in our favorite shows and movies. Because a lot of things just simply aren't black and white. I don't like censorship in either context because it's usually done in a way to not protect someone but rather further an agenda. While I don't overtly draw anything NSFW, I'm not gonna sit on a soapbox and say I'm better than someone who does. We draw different things and there's nothing wrong with that. I know NSFW artists and they're some of the sweetest people you could ever meet. Just because I like Berserk doesn't mean I glorify torture. Just because I like Dio Brando as a character doesn't mean I condone all of his actions. In fact, I tend to like villains a bit more than I do main characters in a lot of shows. It doesn't mean I condone their actions, I just think it's interesting to see how different authors tackle these issues. People on both sides are prone to being reactionary. I mean, in your life, you're probably going to deal with things that you aren't exactly a fan of, but that's just life. I generally think it's better to be educated on these topics either by our favorite shows or by learning history itself, than to pretend that it doesn't exist because we don't like it. The Puritan holier-than-thou attitude is just discouraging to see. And it's not just for fictional fandoms, it's things in fashion and general discourse in public. No one deserves to be doxxed or harassed because they drew a ship that you don't like. The creator of a series shouldn't be harassed just because a certain ship didn't become endgame. And saying that doesn't make me the devil either. But that's just my 2 cents on the whole topic. If you like topics such as this, then don't hesitate to like and subscribe like I said before. And I also talk about these issues quite a lot on Twitch, twitch.tv/Icena19. And in the description I'll likely have my other socials where you can follow me on. But this was something that I really did want to get off my chest. Because, if it isn't really directly harming anyone or anything, does it really matter what a person does in a fandom? I think people are becoming way too uptight in a space that's meant to be fun and creative. But that's just my 2 cents. But until next time, goodbye and take care. Peace.